Hi, everyone. I am Dr. Tadiwa Elisha, and for this presentation, I will be sharing with you on Chapter 3 for research students. This presentation is specifically designed for those students who are doing their final year project in the research mode, those who are doing the research mode. So I will be specifically looking at chapter 3, which is the methodology. I would like to give this presentation in two parts. The first part is going to be very theoretical, and then the second part, which is going to come a bit later, is going to be practical with examples and ways and methods on how exactly can we design a good uh, methodology section, chapter 3 section for research students while you are doing your FYP. Okay, so this will be the topic of our discussion today, chapter 3 for research students, which we normally call methodology, the methodology chapter. So as we developing our reports, our either our FYP1 report or FYP2 report, which is the whole thesis for your final year project, there are some components which we need to pay specific attention to. So these components of the report are normally presented in structured chapters, is in chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 4, chapter 5, and so on and so forth. The chapters are just a stratification of the report. The university has got its own recommended structure, which you must strictly observe. But outside the university, that structure might change. So it's not a fixed structure outside the university, but within the university, it is a fixed structure. The components of this report include the problem statement, objectives and scope of study, a literature review, procedure or methodology, results and findings, conclusions, and recommendations. So these components, they fall into different chapters, which can be identified as chapter 1, introduction, chapter 2, literature review, chapter 3, methodology, chapter 4, results and analysis, chapter 5, conclusions. While we are looking at this structure, this short talk is basically based on the chapter 3 in IUKL thesis structure, which is the methodology chapter. This chapter is evaluated uh, using, in most cases, 4 stages of evaluation. So before you go into designing your methodology chapter, you need to know what are the expectations from you. I have listed the general expectations of chapter 3 as the first or the least expectation, which gives you the lowest mark, is that the research method and project activities are insufficient and achievable with inadequate methods. So your methods, they are not enough to cover what you declare or you want to do. The activities are insufficient for you to achieve whatever you want to do. So you will get the least marks here. The second is research method and project activities are sufficient, moderately achievable with adequate methods. So the activities, the project activities, they are sufficient, but they might not be fully achievable. you have to design your work in such a way that whatever you do must be achievable during your research. And then number 3, which is the second best, is the research method and project activities are comprehensive, achievable with suitable methods. Here you have covered almost everything. The research method is quite clear. The project activities, they are well defined and comprehensive, and they are achievable with suitable methods. The best one will be the last option, where the research method and project activities that are highly comprehensive, highly achievable, with extremely appropriate methods. So this is the ultimate goal. You want to get the best research project. You have to aim for a research method and project activities that are highly comprehensive, highly achievable, with extremely appropriate methods. How do we normally do this? Normally, when we are doing research, we are trying to find out the outcome of a certain setup or a certain phenomenon. So we create a certain a certain scenario, and then we experiment with that certain scenario. That is the research. We are trying to find out what might happen, what will happen, what can happen if a certain element is induced onto a certain phenomenon. So most of us, the mistake we do is we set our standards extremely high. So after we set the standards extremely high, we will not be able to find a comprehensive method and activities that are highly comprehensive and highly achievable with extremely appropriate methods. We will fail to achieve these. Then we end up being in the second category, third category, or even in the last category. It's because we fail to declare something which is reasonable and achievable. So upon evaluating what you are supposed to do, we now have to look at the methods or the methodology. Before we go into the methods and methodology, we need to know what exactly do we mean when we say methods and what exactly do we mean when we say methodology. These are two different things, but they coexist. Methodology is a higher level of application of the methods. At FYP, undergraduate level, we do not expect you, when you are doing research, when you are doing a project research, to look at methodology. No, because that is extremely demanding and extremely higher levels. What we need to focus on are the methods only. Within methodology, there are a number of methods which are existent in there. So we look at the definitions of methods and methodology. Methods are just behavior tools used to select a research technique. Methods, they are just tools which we use to select a research technique. So these methods, they are applied during the later stage of a research study. We apply these at the later stage of our research study. After we have done the literature review, after we have done the chapter 1, we have identified our objectives, we have identified the problem statement, we have identified the solution statements, then only we will look at the methods which can satisfy those objectives one by one. Extremely important. We will see later why this is important. On the other side, methodology is analysis of all methods and procedures of the investigation. The key word here is analysis. When we are looking at methodology, we have to go deep into analysis of each and every method which we are going to use. At FYP, we do not do this analysis. We do not do a comprehensive analysis of all the methods. We just select appropriate methods to satisfy what we just need to do. We might do a little bit of analysis, but it's not going to be as comprehensive as when it comes to methodology. Methodologies are applied during the initial stage of the research process. So before we go to apply our methods, we have to do a thorough methodology. We have to present a thorough methodology. That methodology, it has to be extremely comprehensive to such an extent that it covers all the research aspects which we are going to be looking at. Because of the element of time, because of the element of the value or the depth of a final year project for undergraduate, we don't normally focus on methodology. We go straight to the methods. Now, having said that, what are the kinds of methods do we use in research? So when we are talking of research, we have a few methods which can be used. The first method is observation or participant observation. That is method number one. When we are doing research, we are declaring that we want to find out how a certain thing, how a certain setup, how a certain element behaves in a different application, in a different setup, in a different phenomenon. For example, I want to see if I am driving a car at 50 kilometers per hour and I hit another car which is also traveling at 50 kilometers per hour in the opposite direction, what is going to happen to my head, to my body, to my hands, to my legs? Am I going to die? Am I going to take my car and go and drive it in the opposite direction and induce an accident and see if I die? Oh, maybe I will die. I will not do that. So what do? We have to do some observations. We have to see some observations. Involuntary accidents which genuinely happen, then we can go and analyze. How fast were the cars traveling? We observe the scene of the accident. What happened to the car? What happened to the driver? What type of car was it? Then we collect all this information. That is research. From all that information we get through this kind of observation, we can come up with some conclusions that the passenger in car number one, or the passengers in the in a certain car, they were not wearing some seat belts. They died. The passengers who were in the opposite car, they were wearing seat belts. They did not die. So we observe that if you put on a seat belt and you are driving a car, you happen to get into an accident, chances of surviving are very high if you wear a seat belt. That's observation. You just go and see and look. How do the Grab drivers, the motorbike, the Matrambit for the Grab, how do they behave on traffic lights? Do they respect the traffic lights? Or they just go as long as they feel they are safe? So what do? We go and observe. During peak hour, during less peak hour, Grab motorbike and those who are not Grab, the normal rider. at the traffic light. So we look, how many motorbikes come? 100. How many of them were Grab motorbikes? 60. Those who were Grab motorbikes, how many stopped when the traffic light was red? 0. Those who are not Grab motorbikes, how many stopped when the traffic light was red? 20 out of 40. So we see that 100% of the Grab drivers, riders, respect the traffic lights. But 50% of the non-Grab riders, they do observe the traffic lights. So we observe, we go and we look at the situation, observe, collect information, process it, and then we come up with a conclusion. That is one of the methods which is used in research. The other methods can be surveys. You can have a survey. There are different kinds of surveys which can be done, as well as interviews. So surveys can be in form of questionnaires. You can have some questionnaires, distribute the questionnaires with carefully designed questions which are designed to answer the research questions which you have outlined in chapter 1. Those research questions, they are the ones which are going to lead to your objectives. So if you answer those research questions from the answers you're going to get from the survey, then you can conclude what is this objective and how is it going to be achieved? What is the outcome of this objective? Through survey, you can also have interviews. What is the difference between interviews and questionnaires? Interviews, normally we go, we ask, we listen, we interpret, and we conclude from interviews. The way of analyzing information from interviews and from surveys, which are normally done through questionnaires, are the two different ways. For surveys, normally we do quantitative analysis, and for interviews, we do qualitative analysis. So in my next presentation, I will be looking at how do we do an observation, how do we do a survey, how do we do a proper interview, what is a focus group, what composes a focus group, what is an experiment, what do we need to do, what do we need to know, what do we need to expect when we run an experiment. Is it easy to do an experiment or is it difficult? We are going to look also at secondary data analysis, information which we do not need to collect through observation, surveys, interviews, focus groups, or experiments. This is information which we are going to collect from existing material. We analyze existing material which have been presented before in proper academic structured writing and approved by acceptable bodies such as journals, conferences. These have been presented, accepted, so we can use that kind of information as secondary data or secondary information to come up with some conclusion. How many people died because of lack of ambulances during the peak of COVID-19 pandemic in Malaysia? So we cannot repeat the COVID-19 peak in Malaysia. But there is information which has been collected through MySajetra. We can go to the Ministry of Health and ask, how many people died during the pandemic? Oh, 400,000. How many of them came to hospital, arrived in hospital, stayed in hospital, and later died? We get a certain number. How many of them died on the way to the hospital in an ambulance? And how many of them died at home while waiting for medical help to come? So we have to get this secondary data. We analyze it, we process it, we analyze it, and then we come up with some conclusions. And then we have what is called mixed methods. Mixed methods is just a combination of some of these above methods. So we have observations, surveys, interviews, focus groups, experiments, secondary data analysis. So you can do an experiment and compare with secondary data. That is mixed method. Or you can do survey and also do an interview. You can also do some experiments and verify your experiments through some survey. That is mixed methods. The most important part is you have to really structure your method in such a way that it is useful and it has got a good relation with your objectives, with your problem statement, and they are designed in such a way that they will give you the necessary answers. So it's all about designing your instruments, your research instruments, and also being able to analyze the information which you get from your research instruments. That is on the methods. So what are the recommendations? What are the recommendations? When you are doing your final year project and you choose the way or the route of doing a research, you want to use the research method. Your work is based on research. These are the few recommendations which I can give you. They are not universal and they are not compulsory, but they are recommendations, mostly coming from experiments, from experiences, and also from recommendations by well-established researchers. So what are these? It's better to divide your work into stages. Don't do your work as one chunk, because if during the process of your research you have a small problem within the whole entire process, then you have to start everything. But if you divide into stages, when you finish the first stage, you look at the second, third, fourth, and fifth. And how do you determine these stages? Each stage must have its own method to achieve it. If the method is exactly the same, you might as well use not divide the work. But if the stages might use different methods, then you divide the work into different working stages. So for each project, a lot of reviews must be done to justify the selection of a method or to verify the capabilities of a chosen method to solve the existing problem. This is where literature review comes in. You have to do a little bit of literature review to find out who have used this method before to do their research. What were they doing? What kind of research were they doing? What is the relationship between their research and my research? What were their results? Were they good or bad? If there is a close correlation between all these questions and your work, then you can adopt those methods. Because you don't want to do an experiment which you don't know whether it can solve your problem or not. You must have an idea. This kind of experiment is possible to solve my problem. You have to, it means that you have to review existing methods. You have to do a review of existing methods, but you don't take all the methods. You look at methods first, which are related to what you want to do. Then you can see from existing literature, is it possible to use those methods? After you have done a review of existing methods, then only you can suggest relevant methods. You don't just use a method because it is there. In research, you can only tell the result at the end of the research. Different from other projects where you can tell the results while you are, and then you see that this, you use the agile methods, you do this part is not right, you can redo it immediately after that. But for research, you will know the results at the end of the research. So if you do not carefully choose the methods which you are going to use, you will only know at the end of your final year project that, oh, these experiments, they are not going to give me the results which I expected. Then you have to start again. So you have to get relevant methods. You can suggest relevant methods, and you can do a little bit preliminary analysis. Like when you want to do questionnaires, you can design the questionnaire. You want to send it to 500 people. Don't send to 500 people at once. Send to 10 people first, and then get their responses, analyze their responses, and see whether they are giving you the information which you want. Can it be processed the way you want to process it or not? Then only you can give to the rest of the 450 respondents. So those are the recommendations. And for now, this is the end of my presentation. I will come back with another presentation where I am going to specifically look at I'm going to specifically look at the methods one by one and try to give you an in-depth analysis of the work. So this is all I have to share with you. I thank you, and I hope this is going to help you in your work. See you in the next presentation. Bye-bye.